Welcome to the Success Through Failure podcast, the show that reveals failure as your path to success. You'll listen to intriguing interviews with some of the most successful people on the planet and learn how their failures became a launchpad for success and how yours can too. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, speaker, and personal coach, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Success Through Failure. Today I bring you Nate Quarry. Nate grew up in a sheltered lifestyle. He did not participate in organized sports until age 24 when he first became exposed to MMA. After a period of self-discovery, he rejected his Jehovah's Witness upbringing, which he later characterized as a cult who control their members 24 hours a day. This led to the expulsion from his faith and caused him to be alienated from his family and his former friends. He began to associate with others outside the church and along the way began to train in mixed martial arts fighting. He landed a spot on Ultimate Fighter, the TV show, and eventually made his way to Team Quest in Oregon. He fought 22 professional fights, winning 18 of those, including some fights in UFC. He's now an entrepreneur with his hands in multiple businesses, which we're going to dive into a little bit. And if you don't have time to listen to this entire episode, if you hear something you like, but you don't have time to jot it down, be sure to grab your free copy of the action plan from this episode, as well as get access to action plans from every episode by going to jimharshawjr.com/action. Nate, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is awesome. I love your work. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and it's pretty cool to have you on as well. Tom Rowland introduced us. He recommended that I reach out to you. He's for the listener. He's the fishing guide. I interviewed him on episode number 60. Fishing guide, host of multiple TV shows. If you want to listen to that show about just really living your passion and doing something you love, that's a great episode to listen to with Tom Rowland. But you were on Tom's show. So what was that like, by the way, fishing on TV, on a TV show with Tom?
That was amazing. Tom Rowland is such a cool cat. It's funny because if you looked at the people I consider my friends, they are so wide and varied. You would never think there'd be any connection with any of them. But really what it all comes down to is passion. And Tom has such an incredible passion for fishing. He, to me, is the prime example of whatever it is that you love to do, someone out there is making a lot of money doing it or making a living doing it at the very least. Why can't you do that or pursue that? And going out with Tom, and I hadn't fished since I was a kid. And he had to tell me, yo, set the hook, pull it in. I'm yelling at him, I don't know what that means. And I'm trying to reel in a shark, literally a shark, and that was such a great adventure. It's funny, he contacted me. I fought for the world title, middleweight title for the UFC, got brutally knocked out by Rich Franklin. And if you've seen a UFC in the past 5 or 6 years, you've seen that knockout because it's such a beautiful knockout. They show it at the start of every UFC pay-per-view. But Tom sees this. Here's my interview after the fight. The next morning when his kids wake up, he brings them out and says, this is how a man loses. And right then he just said, I want him on my show. And all I had said after my fight was I was getting interviewed by Joe Rogan. And it was such a ridiculous story. So I had 3 first-round knockouts in UFC. UFC offered me a title fight against Rich Franklin, to which I said yes, probably rushed myself because I had roughly about 6.5 minutes of fight time in the UFC. Now I'm getting offered this title fight against a very dominant champion at the time. So he, like I said, brutally knocks me out. I fall like a tree, very stiff. I crash down. So I wake up. I don't know what's going on. I don't know where I'm at. I just want to leave and go back to the dressing room. And the Nevada State Athletic Commission, the doctors are there trying to check me out, make sure that I'm okay. And they won't even let my coach over. So my coach is arguing with them. He says, he just got knocked out. He doesn't know where he is. Let him see a friendly face. Let me come over. So my coach, Robert Follis, comes over, says, Nate, they gotta check you out. Let him look at you. Sit down on the stool. So I sit down on the stool, stand back up and say, fine, let's go. Like, no, that's not it. So I sit down on the stool. They take a look at me. Joe Rogan or somebody comes over and says, hey, we want to interview him. And my coach says, oh, no way. He is not talking after this. He doesn't know what's going on. And he says that I looked at him and I had this moment of clarity where I said, Robert, no, I have something I need to say. And Robert looks at me and says, are you serious? Do you know what just happened? And I said, yeah, I just fought for the world title and I got knocked out. I have something I need to say. He says, okay. So I go over to Joe Rogan. Joe's asking me about the fight. Was this too early? That was the biggest thing. Was this too early in your career? Did you get rushed? Did you feel rushed into this title shot? And I looked at him and I said, Joe, I'm never going to look back on my life and wonder, what if I had taken this chance? Maybe I did get rushed into this. Maybe I wasn't ready. Obviously, I just got knocked out. But I'm never going to look back on my life and wonder, what if I had taken this chance? I did the best I could. Rich is a great champion. I would much rather go through my life knowing who I am and what I've accomplished and always wondering what could have been if I would have made an effort. And I think I said some other things. And then what was it? Oh, then the interview was over. Robert Follis came back over. And I looked at him and I said, hey, Robert, where are we? He goes, what? We're in Vegas. I go, what the hell are we doing in Vegas? He's like, oh, man, we got to get you out of here.
You had a moment of clarity quickly.
Yeah, it was
quickly
gone.
Left you.
And so Tom saw this, and I think I must have said something a little bit more poignant than what I just repeated. But he called me and said, the show, and I said, man, that sounds amazing. I looked up his show and saw the incredible things that he's doing, his passion for what he's doing. I said, well, buddy, I just had a spinal fusion back surgery. I've been going through my recovery, and now I'm finally 22 months after that knockout. I'm ready now to fight again in the UFC. I'm going to fight Pete Sell. It's going to be a brutal fight. It's going to be really tough. Pete's angry. I beat him before. And now he's getting a rematch. He's got the champ, Matt Serra, at the time in his corner. So, well, let's schedule it 5 or 6 days after this fight, and I'll fly out to Florida, and we'll do the show. So I fought Pete Sell, got the hell kicked out of me for 2 rounds, came back and knocked him out in the 3rd, and then flew to Florida 3 or 4 days after that. And you can see me limping towards the boat. My eye was black and barely able to move. But yeah, it was a great time out there with him, and seeing the passion that he had, it was incredible.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy full of passion. And talk a little bit about what you just said. I mean, you came off of back surgery, and let me actually back up once real quick and say, for the listener, failure is one thing, but failure to even try hurts a lot worse. Failure to get out there and living with regret is such a worse feeling. It never goes away, but if you're going to try, you're going to fail. If you're going to keep trying things over and over and over, failure is going to happen. And Nate, yours happened obviously on pay-per-view and live television, but in most of ours, for the listener, it's not going to happen on live television in front of millions of people in front of the world. But you've got to try. There's something burning deep inside of you that you want to try. Take the first step. Give it a shot. But, Nate, I do want to ask you about your back surgery, because you had serious back surgery, and it's a back surgery that, if I'm not mistaken, it was like nobody's really recovered from this before to compete professionally in athletics. Am I right? Something along those lines, because it was a pretty serious back surgery, and you not only went out and competed in a sport, but you competed in the UFC.
Well, over and over again throughout my life, I've been incredibly lucky. There's no other way to say it, and I will acknowledge that, whether it's being in the right place at the right time. When I started training in MMA, Randy Couture, one of the greatest champions the UFC MMA had ever seen, happened to live 5 or 10 minutes from the gym where I was training at and started training with us. So I
and Matt Lindland was there too, right? Is that right?
Yeah,
Matt Lindland,
that was up at Team Quest, but yeah.
Okay. And Team for the listener, by the way, that's episode 17. I interviewed Matt Lindland of Team Flesh. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, over and over again. I just happen to have. They say everything happens for a reason. I'm not a huge fan of that saying because I honestly don't think so. But I think if we look at everything that happens, we can try to pull something positive out of it. So I have degenerative disc disease. The discs in my back just wear out quicker than most people. My father dealt with this, but back then, 30 years ago, a surgery would have just killed him. He would have never recovered. So degenerative disc disease means can you imagine having a bad knee where all the cartilage is worn away and you need to get knee surgery or even knee replacement surgery? Well, that's what was happening in my back, in my lumbar, the lower part of my back. The L23 vertebrae, the disc in between there, had just completely worn away. So I had bone on bone just grinding. And when it's in your back, there's no relief. You have constant pressure on your back. Maybe the only thing that will relieve it is laying down and extreme narcotic medications. So I went from fighting for the world title to 3 months later not being able to pick up my 5-year-old little girl. I ended up going to this doctor in Las Vegas, and he said, I just discovered this new technique where instead of cutting through your abdominals or through the muscles in your back, we come in from the side, and we don't cut through the psoas muscle. We just kind of spread it out. We go in there, scrape out what's left of the disc, put in a little spacer that kind of looks like a Lego, put a couple screws in there to hold your vertebrae together as your body then fuses itself together. And I said, this sounds amazing. I'd been in construction my whole life, and so I knew that the less damage you can do, the better it would be. And that's all really surgery is for the most part. It's construction. You're trying to rebuild the body. Oh, this new technology called the XLIF, extreme lateral inner body fusion, seemed like this could maybe be the savior for me. But as you just said, no one had ever done it and attempted to do something like I was planning on doing. And I told the doc, I'm planning on fighting again. That's what I need. You need to fix me. I'm the only hope my daughter has. This is my dream. And if this surgery didn't work, then what? I'm not an educated man. I'm trying to think, okay, well, I came up in construction. What can I do in construction that doesn't put a huge workload on my body? So I'm thinking, geez, maybe driving a garbage truck or a concrete truck, something like that, and essentially watching my dreams die. But I have this surgery within 24 hours. I was up walking around the hospital. At 2.5 weeks, I went on a 3-mile hike at Mount Charleston, just outside of Las Vegas. The 3-month mark, I was cleared to start working with my boxing coach. And at 6 months to the day, the doctor told me, you're good. You're recovered. Go do your thing. And I looked at him and I said, Doc, I'm going to fight again. What do you think? And even now he said, give it a shot. We'll see what happens. Because nothing like this had ever been done. And I went from his office to the gym and started training that day with boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing. And 15 months after my surgery, I was fighting for the UFC. And it was such a ridiculous story that Joe Rogan actually held up a model of my back and showed the surgery and the implants that I had and said, yeah, just a few years ago, this would not have been possible. And due to this brutal fight that I had, it was a Rocky show. I get knocked down in the second. And I remember just thinking to myself, do not stop this fight. If you stop this fight, all this hard work was for. And I jumped back up, and later on in the second round, he did a Superman punch where you jump up in the air and you crash down with a big overhand right. And he knocked something loose. And I remember thinking to myself right then and there, okay, I've done it. I'm back now. I've proved that I can operate, that I can take a beating, that I can fight after this. And this is exactly how this fight is supposed to go. I'm supposed to take a beating. But now that time is over. Now it's time for me to win this fight because I am clearly down. I've lost both rounds. And if I don't win the third round by knockout or submission, I lose. And I came out for the third round just with that fire in my heart, knowing I can't fail again. And even at one point, I shoved him. You don't shove in an MMA fight. You hit. If you're close enough to shove, you can hit somebody. But instead, I shoved him. and then kicked him and threw an overhand right and knocked him down. And I stood above him and I said, you talked so much trash before this fight. If you've got anything else to say, now is your time. And then I followed up with a big right hand, and the referee jumped in and stopped the fight. And I became the spokesman for what's possible after back surgery right then and there. Because before this, no one had ever seen that you could have a major back surgery, a spinal fusion, and then return to living a life such as fighting in the UFC. As soon as they operate on your back, you've got all the nerves in there that control half of your body for your lower spine. And they're cutting through muscle tissue in the past. They're doing all of this. And so the company itself came to me and said, we want to tell your story. Please let us. And so to this day, I work with the company NuVasive as their spokesman. And I tell people ask me, well, should I get back surgery? I'm in pain. I say, man, I have no idea. I'm not going to diagnose you. I'm not even going to recommend you get the surgery that I had, because I don't want to push you in a way towards something that may not be the answer for you. All I'm going to do is hopefully give you the confidence to go see an educated doctor who can then diagnose you and decide what technique, what technology is best for you. And it's one of those things where at the time it was the worst thing imaginable. I had just fought for the world title, been knocked out. Now the UFC wants me to fight again. They're looking for opponents, but I can't. My own body is betraying me. The body that no matter what the problem had been in the past, I could either metaphorically or literally hit it and make it go away. And now my biggest tool had betrayed me. But now here I am 10 years later, just thinking how many people I've been able to impact and affect through hearing my story. People have called me and said, after seeing your fight, I called my doctor the next day and I got my back surgery. I now have a family because I saw what was capable. And that just blows my mind that I've been able to affect people that way. It's such a blessing, such a blessing out of something that at the time was the worst thing imaginable.
It's an interesting story because so many, bad things happen, right? Things that are out of our control happen to us. They've happened in the past. They're going to happen again. And you don't know which one is going to be your comeback story, part of your this amazing comeback story. I mean, it seems so bad at the moment, and it was, but now it's just part of your story. It's part of this amazing story. It's part of your history, part of your legacy. And same thing for the listener. It's bad things may have happened to you in the past. Something bad might be happening to you right now. You might be dealing with the after effects of that right now at this moment as you're working out or driving down the road listening to this. That's part of your story. It's going to be amazing when you either make a comeback like Nate did or it sets you off on a different path, a better path, and it helps you discover new things, new strengths, and new opportunities for you. And it's all about your mindset. You could have given up and quit, Nate, and said, this is just the end of my career, or you could have kept, thinking there's a chance, and you kept moving forward, and good things happen. So I think it's a great lesson for us all. Nate, I talked about in the intro, reading your bio, a little bit about your upbringing. Can you share some about your life growing up, because you weren't introduced to organized sports until you were 24 years old? Tell us about your life growing up.
Yeah, I was born and raised a Jehovah's Witness. So while all the other kids were out playing sports and getting into trouble, having adventures, as a Jehovah's Witness, they control what movies you can watch, what music you can listen to, what books you can read, what friends you can have, even what members of your family you can associate with. Their whole thing is, if you are not a Jehovah's Witness, you are not with us. And I remember being told over and over again, they may not necessarily be bad people, but they're definitely not good people. They're not going to help persuade you to follow God's laws and God's laws and instructions. So being raised that way was really in a bubble. But at the same time, I'm going to public school. And I was just the nerdiest little kid. I had big, thick glasses. We were fairly poor, so I had garage sale clothes, and not being able to pursue sports, which could have been an equalizer for me, just put me into this bubble where I hated my upbringing. I really hated my life. I remember I was in 7th grade, and this is where I really started to see my heart started to break. 7th grade, as this nerdy little kid who literally was spit on, had the book slapped out of my hands, got my head slammed into my locker one time, almost dropped me, almost knocked me out. I got slammed so hard. But I was at a school assembly, and there was this 8th grader who also seemed like kind of a nerdy kid, who was pleasant to me, a nice enough guy. And they're putting on a wrestling demonstration. And it was this nerdy 8th grade kid versus this cool 8th grade kid. I'm sure it wasn't set up to be anything like that, but this to me was phenomenal. Seeing this, and this nerdy 8th grade kid put on a wrestling demonstration like you would not believe. He destroyed the cool kid, lifting him up, tossing him, suplex, and my jaw just dropped. And I sat there and I said, I would give anything to do that. And we hear people say that all the time. I'd give anything to be able to do that. No, I would have given anything to do that. And I proved that later on in my life. But at the place that I was in, if I went home and I told my father, I want to wrestle, not only would it have been against what our household would allow, I would have been beaten, and I would have been told, God is ashamed of you for having these desires. And with Jehovah's Witnesses, they start off right from the get-go saying everyone who's not a Jehovah's Witness is going to be killed at Armageddon. So that's roughly 99.9% of the population. There's roughly, I think, 7 million Jehovah's Witnesses in the world. But not only that, it also starts within the organization to make sure everyone stays scared and so afraid of upsetting God, they never even take a step outside of the organization. Well, if I would have said I had these worldly desires, it would have been horrific for me. So I just buried those feelings and really went inside of myself. Then when I was 24 years old, I started to drift away. I was so miserable and hated my life so much that I was at a party with some people. This guy comes up to me and says, man, there's these 2 guys beating the hell out of each other in a cage on TV. And I thought, well, that just sounds ridiculous. Who would do that in this day and age? I was against boxing because I thought it was violent. So obviously I'd be against MMA, or no holds barred as it was called at the time, because this was violence, because I equated it with my childhood. My childhood was so violent that everything else like this must be violence as well. Well, I go inside and I see Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie fighting. And I see the skill, the athleticism they're displaying. And then at the end, they hug each other. They show respect to one another. And my eyes were opened. And I said, my God, this isn't violence. This is sport. And I had wanted to do that so badly throughout my childhood that at this point, still believing that Jehovah's Witnesses were the one true religion, I said, well, if God wants to kill me for pursuing this, so be it. And so I went down and I started training in secret so no one would know about it. Well, they found out later, and that I was also now engaging in illicit acts, dating, seeing a woman, that kind of stuff. So they excommunicated me from the church, which means that not only do you lose every friend you'd ever had, also your family who is Jehovah's Witness will disown you, and even they won't talk to you. But for me, I just said, I would rather take a chance in living my life and following my dreams and maybe pursue happiness at this point and die at Armageddon if that's the way it is. But they also try to take so much away from you, the Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, now I had a new community. These other athletes or training partners and team at the gym where I was training. And then I wasn't working for a Jehovah's Witness at this time either. So I did have other opportunities to go out and see the world. And while they tried to take away so much from me, I no longer gave them anything to take away. And that's the big thing with a cult. It's all mind control. If you don't give them anything, they don't have anything. All they can really do is take away that which you love. And at this point, I said, you know what? If you will only love me, if you'll only talk to me, if I'm a member of your cult, well, that's conditional love. And I don't want anything to do with conditional love any longer. I'm going to go out and I'm going to live my own life. And the only conditional love that I'm going to have is you must love me unconditionally. And until that point, you're no longer welcome in my life. Should that change? Should my mother call me up and say, I've been a fool? Please let me be a part of your life. I would say, of course, I want you in my life. But until that date, I've only got room for unconditional love. And now seeing what that really is, because when you're raised with conditional love, imagine your parents essentially telling you every single night, we love you as long as you do what we tell you. And as soon as you mess up, as soon as you make a mistake, we're no longer going to love you. We'll love you from afar, but we won't talk to you. If you're in trouble, don't call us. It's such a mental issue. And ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, people that were raised that way, people in other cults, it is devastating for so many of them. That I've been in a documentary called The Truth Be Told, done by who's become a good friend of mine, Gregorio Smith. And he interviewed a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, himself being one as well. And that was his therapy, to tell the story through this movie. And we see also often people that are stuck in this, that they can't get beyond it. And I want to be that voice that they only control what you give them. Get out, start your own life, make your own life, follow your dreams. It's been such an amazing thing. When we launched the movie here in Portland and we went up to Seattle, I stood in front of the crowd, gave a talk afterwards. And I said, I've seen so many people that were a part of a gym, part of a team, where they were unhappy. They weren't getting the best coaching, but they were too afraid to stand up and say, I need a change. I'm going to go someplace else. If you really want me to be successful, you'll support me. Or people that work at a job that they hate, who are so afraid that they're comfortably miserable. They're willing to go to this job every day because they know they'll get a paycheck. They know what to expect. And it's just too scary to pursue their dreams. Even if that means just taking a night class so they can become better educated and get a different job. Or somebody who's in an abusive relationship or a loveless marriage. They're so afraid of leaving that they'll live their entire life that way. So as I stood in front of that crowd, I said, every single one of you at some point in your life said, I'm unhappy. I'm willing to risk losing everything for the opportunity to maybe find happiness. That strength is very uncommon out there in the world. And every one of you needs to applaud yourselves and celebrate the strength that you have. And every single one of you in here is worthy of unconditional love. I want you all to say it. I am worthy of unconditional love. And as I looked out into the crowd, I saw a woman crying with her head down, shaking her head no, and who appeared to be her husband or her boyfriend, holding her, saying, do you see? Listen to what he's saying. I love you. You deserve my love. If I can get out there and be just the slightest influence on people to let them know that they deserve more, it's the right thing to do, and I'm happy to do so.
Wow. I want to talk to you next about how this has influenced your parenting. But first, for the listener, if this is striking a chord with you, episode 48, episode 49 are both really good episodes. I know Doug Muir in episode 49 talks about his upbringing, and boy, what a journey that he had to go through when he was young. And now he's just an incredible entrepreneur, and his story is absolutely amazing. But Nate, you have a little girl now. Mm-hmm. How's your upbringing influenced your being a dad?
Well, they say we either become our fathers or the opposite of our fathers. It's funny how so many people, they hated their childhood or how they were treated. And instead of doing everything they can to change it, they just fall right in line. Well, I was abused and I'm angry, so I'm going to take that out on the world. And I said, no. My goal when my daughter was born was to tell her that I loved her on a daily basis. And oh man, it was hard, because I was told, whenever I was told I was loved by my parents, and we're talking maybe a half a dozen times in my entire life, it was always preceded with the words, I know I don't tell you this enough, but I love you. And I said, that is not going to be me. I'm going to raise my daughter so she knows I love her unconditionally. So from day one, as I'm holding this newborn baby, I'm standing there struggling with the words, I love you. I love you. It was so hard to say because I'd never heard those words. I didn't understand unconditional love. And now they always say your children teach you more than you teach them. Well, that's pretty much BS. But she taught me unconditional love. And I made this a goal that every day I tell her how much I love her. And now it's nothing. She tells me she loves me 4 or 5 times a day. I tell her the same. Every night we blow kisses to each other and we swallow those kisses. I grab it out of the air and I take a bite and I swallow it. And she's almost 17. She's no longer little anymore. I wanted her to know she has my love unconditionally. And she's made mistakes. She's done some things, but when she's punished, I make sure she knows I only punish you when you willingly make these errors. If you make a mistake like a kid, that's what we do. It's not that big of a deal. We'll correct it and we'll get back on path. When she got her first report card with letters in it, I think it was 5th grade. It was 1 C and I think 5 or 6 B's. And it just blew my mind because my daughter is so intelligent. And I sat her down and I said, what is going on here? What are the problems? And I realized, well, I'm parenting just like I was parented. You have homework, do your homework, get good grades. And for me, that's what it was. The highest report card I ever got, I believe, was in 7th grade. I got 6 A's and a B, almost straight A's, something I had never accomplished. And if my daughter came home with that, we would celebrate, and I would say, I love you. How can we raise that other B to an A so we get straight A's? My father looked at me and said, what happened with the B? And I was just crushed. The best report card I'd ever gotten, and it still wasn't enough. And then when he saw how upset I was, then he started yelling at me. Don't get your nose out of joint. I'll give you something to cry out, those kinds of things. And I realized my parents are never going to be satisfied with what I do. No matter what I do, it's never going to be enough. And so I quit trying. Well, when I saw my daughter's report card and I knew, okay, is she stupid? Is this the best that she can do? Because if it is, so be it. But it wasn't. She's ridiculously intelligent. So I said, what do I need to do to fix this? I need to change me, my parenting style. What can I do? So we set goals. She walks through the door. She tells me what homework she has. We decide, does she need to do it right then? Can she play for a little bit at the time? Now, can she walk around, take a break? How do we need to approach this? Okay, then I need to spend time checking her homework, seeing how she's done. The next report card, it was a couple A's and the rest B's. Now, her sophomore year of high school, she got straight A's all year long. And she didn't have one easy class all year. It was all hard classes. And it wasn't me going down to the school and complaining to the teachers, well, you're not reaching my child. No. When she has a problem in her class, I always ask her, so every other student there is confused as well. Because is it you or was it the teacher? That's what we need to get to in the first place. Because if it's the teacher, I'll be more than happy to go down and talk to them and find out what we can do to change things. Odds are pretty high it's you. Unless you can show me that every other kid in class is failing, we need to address the problem by what's going on in this household, by changing who we are and what we've done. And I celebrate my daughter's success by putting every one of her straight A report cards in a frame on the wall right inside the front door. So when everybody walks in, they see how proud I am of my daughter's success. But at the same time, I don't hold her to some unreachable standard, to the point where I've even told her, Sierra, my daughter, I would rather have you get a B or fall short of that A in a tougher class. I don't want you to just skate by in easy classes because you're too afraid of failing. No, go ahead and fail. Go ahead and try things and miss the mark, because I want to see you fail greatly than live in this safe little world. Oh, now again, she's got an entire year of tough classes, psychology, physics. She's in her 3rd year of Japanese. And all along, her sport that she's loved is equestrian. She loves to ride horses. She doesn't want to be a fighter. She doesn't want to do jujitsu. So instead of me trying to mold her into who I am, I want her to be successful. It's what she wants to do. And that's her reward. She gets to ride horses as reward for her being a good kid. And now not only, I think she was 12 years old when she started working at the barn as an intern. So not only do I provide her one lesson a week as thank you to her for being such a good kid, due to her working at the barn, she also earns 2 more lessons every week that she gets to participate in. She gets to have the childhood that I never had. And for me, I always think about those kids that had those great high school years. And I always wonder, did you peak in high school? Because for me, I started low, and man, my life just gets better every single year. And I would much rather see my daughter an amazing childhood than look back and think, wow, I had an amazing childhood, but my kids don't, because now I'm a selfish parent and I'm always yearning for those years. No, I want to pay it forward. And I always imagine that hundreds of years from now, as my children, grandchildren, great grandchildren continue the success, they look back at me and said, it was my great grandfather, Nate Quarry, that changed everything for us. He stood up against the odds and said, we're not going to go out like that. And I want to be that catalyst that makes things possible for everyone that follows me.
So Nate, let's move towards talking about the process now. The listener likes to get actionable items out of these episodes. Can you talk? You started organized sports when you were 24 years old, and you shot to the top of the world pretty quickly, relatively quickly. I mean, any habits that you learned then that you're still applying now into your life lessons that you learned as an athlete that you apply to your life now that help you be successful? You're an entrepreneur. You've got your hands in a lot of different things. You've got real estate and some different things going on. You've got, what's it called? Zombie
Cage Fighter.
Zombie Cage Fighter.
The biographical horror story of my life, and everyone can go to zombiecagefighter.com, download a free PDF of the first comic I launched out in 2012.
Very cool. And I'm going to have, for the listener, I'll have that linked into the action plan. If you go to jimharshawjr.com/action, I will have a link to that in the action plan there. So talk to me about habits. Anything that you do on a regular basis that you feel have set you apart, helped you achieve your success?
Well, boy, especially in sports, everybody talks about what a gifted athlete that guy is. And I saw when I started training so many people that were so much better than I was, that had a decade, 15 years head start on me because they wrestled as a kid, because they had these parents that encouraged them. Well, all too often they had things come way too easy for themselves. For me, it was a matter of grit. I'm going to get in there. And I talk about over and over again how lucky I've been. Well, that luck is compounded with being ready. I would show up to watch fights, and the promoter would come up to me and say, I think I've got somebody that'll fight you. Will you take the fight? Yeah. Well, I just showed up to watch, but if you've got somebody that'll fight me, I'll take the fight. 24 hours later, there I'd be, main event of the show. This happened over and over and over again because I was ready when the opportunities came along. Now, as I mentioned earlier, everything you enjoy doing, somebody out there makes a very healthy living doing it. And as I look at every opportunity that I have or everything that I want to do, I pretty much just ask myself 3 questions. That's what breaks it down. Am I smart enough to accomplish this goal? Well, if I'm not, you know what? I can be tomorrow. We have so much access to knowledge. People like yourself that want to share their stories, other people that have been successful, that want to see other people be successful. You can learn a completely foreign language on your phone. How many people take advantage of these things as opposed to spending their day on social media? Am I smart enough? I may not be right now, but I will be when the time comes. Am I too lazy to do this? No. If it's something that I want, I will work myself to death to make this happen. When I'm working on construction projects, my crew knows somebody there has to keep me fed because I am so single-minded, laser-focused that I forget to eat. So I have to have people tell me, take a break, eat some food. It's better for you in the long run. Oh, yeah. I got to eat. I got to do this. Am I too lazy? No. And that's a choice every single one of us can make. Third, am I willing to make the sacrifice necessary to make this happen? And that's an individual decision. How much are you willing to give to see your dreams succeed or even fail? Because I would rather fail greatly, fail in such a way that they show me getting knocked out fighting for the title for the rest of my life. And I can see that poster sitting right here in my house where I was the main event at the MGM Grand, a kid who was raised in a cult, who started training at 24, and by 35, I was fighting for the world title. I was willing to make the sacrifice necessary to see my dreams come true. And now as other opportunities arise for me, I'm dealing with some commercial real estate now, doing some building projects. Am I willing to am I smart enough to make this happen? Geez, there's a lot of unanswered questions. So I go hang out with people that are smarter than me, that have been successful in this. I write down my questions and I know what I want to ask them. And my last question is always the same. What should I be asking you that I'm not smart enough to know that I should ask? What are the things out there I don't even know that I need for this wisdom? And these people see that I'm really wanting to learn. I'm not coming in with any ego. Bruce Lee had the empty the cup metaphor. If your cup is already full, you can't take in any other knowledge. Am I too lazy to learn these things, to put in the time? I always tell everybody my key to success in MMA was that I was willing to work hard and I wasn't afraid to look stupid. Even when I started training and at 24 years of age, I was the shop foreman and the head installer at a sign shop. And that same year, my father at 62 passed away. I went with him to pick up his final paycheck. He was literally passing away, falling asleep as we were driving back to his rental where he and my mother lived because they could no longer even afford to live in the house that he had built with his own two hands. And he passed away 3 weeks later. And I fought the day after he died.
Well, that's an incredible story.
It's
been an interesting ride, it sounds like.
It has been.
So how can we give the listener one action item? What action can they take in the next, let's say, 24 to 48 hours in their lives to start moving towards their goals? Any tip or tactic or action you recommend that they stop and do here?
When you wake up in the morning, look at your life and even write it down. What am I thankful for? I truly believe happiness is based on gratitude. What are you grateful that you have in your life? And then on the other side of the paper, write down, what are you unhappy about? What do you want to change? What can change in your life to make you completely happy? And that happiness, I feel, has to be a hunger inside of you. What is it that you want to change? Whether it's owning your own business, competing in sports, losing weight, making your marriage a better relationship for you and your spouse. Write these things down and set these goals. I found a piece of paper that I had written, 15 years ago about what goals I wanted to have. And I wrote those down and I never even thought about them until I found them again. Every single goal that I had written down, I had accomplished to the letter. And I sat and I looked at these and I went, my God, what if I wrote more lofty goals than this? Where would I be now? Don't sell yourself short. Don't believe those people that tell you you're worthless, you're not smart enough, you're too ugly, whatever it may be. You can accomplish whatever it is that you want to be if you believe in yourself. And that was what I said after I fought Pete Sell in my comeback fight after my surgery. I'm here not just to provide food for my family, but to show everyone out there, you can make your life what you want it to be if you believe in yourself. There's so many people out there that don't believe in you. Don't be one of them. Be someone who believes in what you want to accomplish. Write these things down. You're going to see it. I have my mirror. You can barely see your face in it because I write my goals down where I want to be on my mirror. So I see them every day, several times a day to remind me, this is where I want to be. This is where I'm going. Go to your mirror. Write down your goals. You'll see them every single day.
Nate, I appreciate you making time to come on the show and share your powerful story. A lot of great tips, tactics, and For the listener, I'm going to have all that in the action plan, bunch of the quotes, bunch of the story references, some really great stuff there, Nate. I thank you so much for making time to come on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for what you're doing, being a voice for people out there. Because in this time, we see so many people living their life in fear. They're focusing on the scary things. There has never been a better time to be alive. Crime has been going down every single year. It's never been, it was so much more violent in the 1970s.
Yeah.
We've beaten diseases. We've had a reduction in crime. Don't live in fear. Live your life with excitement and with passion. Those are the things that when you're on your deathbed, what do you want to look back on? Well, I was prepared for the worst case scenario every single day of my life. Cool. So what happens if that happens? You're ready to live in a post-apocalyptic world? Maybe prepare for things not being horrifically bad. Maybe prepare for a life of passion and happiness.
This is coming from a guy, for the listener, this is coming from a guy who has, based on your formative years, have every reason to believe and live a life of fear, and you've overcome that. Amazing story, Nate. Thanks so much for coming on. Where can the listener find you, follow you, check out your businesses, social media, etc.?
Twitter at Nate Quarry. Facebook, I'm just Nathan.Quarry. My website is just go to zombiecagefighter.com if you want to send me an email through there. Like I said, check out the comic book. It really is my biographical horror story. And I'm having a blast telling it because everybody wanted me to write a biography, but I didn't want to write the usual Rocky story. And I'm just an old school nerd, man. I love comic books. I love the medium of how to tell your story that way. And to have people come up to me and say, wow, this is really cool. It's amazing. And I even have my own Zombie Cage Fighter statue now done by the great Randy Bowen of Bowen Designs, who's one of the greatest superhero sculptors in the world. My life has been so incredible. And it only keeps getting better with my amazingly beautiful girlfriend, who's such a hard worker and intelligent, and my incredible, beautiful, intelligent, kind daughter. I'm a very lucky man.
Awesome. We will be following. We will be watching. Nate, thanks so much. And for the listener, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success. Success Through Failure is a member of the Athlete on Fire podcast network. Check out all of our shows at athleteonfire.com.